Listen, I have seen some absolutely ridiculous things in my 47 standard cycles as a guidance counselor at Nexus Prime Academy. I have watched Zephyrian students literally phase through walls when they get embarrassed. I have seen crystalloid younglings accidentally shatter 3 desks because they sneezed too hard. But nothing, and I mean absolutely nothing, prepared me for the day that tiny human kid Marcus Vale walked into my office with what he cheerfully called his emotional support honey badger. My name is Krix Voltan, and I am what you would call a hegemony overseer, standing roughly 9 feet tall with 4 arms and the patience of a saint. Or at least I thought I had patience until I met humans. The trouble started on a Tuesday. It always starts on a Tuesday, doesn't it? The morning announcements had barely finished crackling through the Neuralink speakers when my door chimed with that particular urgent tone that meant someone was about to make my day infinitely more complicated. In walked Principal Ghareth, a 12-foot-tall apex predator species from the Crimson Nebula sector. Now, Ghareth is what we politely call old-school discipline. His species evolved from something that could bite a shuttlecraft in half, and he never let anyone forget it. His office walls were decorated with the skulls of various creatures he had disciplined over the years, and his idea of conflict resolution involved a lot of intimidating roars and strategic displays of his rather impressive fangs. "Krix," he growled, his voice rumbling like distant thunder. "We have a situation with the new human transfer student." I set down my morning stimulant drink. Let me guess. Marcus Vale. The very same. Ghareth's massive claws clicked against my desk as he leaned forward. The little creature refuses to participate in standard dominance hierarchies. When I attempted to establish proper pack order yesterday, he actually had the audacity to say, and I quote, "Thanks, but I'm good, big guy." I couldn't help but chuckle. Humans had this absolutely maddening habit of treating everyone like equals, regardless of size, strength, or evolutionary advantages. It drove most species absolutely insane. He patted my arm, Krix. My ARM exclamation mark Ghareth's voice hit a pitch that rattled my coffee mug. "A prey species!" Patted my arm, like I was some domesticated pet. "Did you explain pack dynamics to him?" "Of course I did." I gave him the full display. Extended claws, intimidation posture, the works. Do you know what he did? Ghareth's golden eyes narrowed to slits. He asked if I needed a hug. I had to physically bite my tongue to keep from laughing. Humans were either the bravest species in the galaxy or the most suicidally naive. The jury was still out on which. Where is Marcus now? Integration Classroom 7, but that is not why I am here. Ghareth began pacing, which was terrifying considering each of his steps shook the floor. "The problem is Brutus." "Ah, Brutus. Every school has one, doesn't it? The apex predator student who makes everyone else's life miserable." Brutus Grimjaw was a 12-foot-tall saurian from the Death World colonies, with more teeth than strictly necessary, and the personality of a particularly vindictive asteroid. His species had evolved from pack hunters who considered psychological torment a form of art. What has Brutus done now? He has decided that Marcus represents a challenge to his authority. Apparently, the human's complete lack of appropriate fear responses is being interpreted as defiance. I sighed. This was going to be a long day. Has there been physical contact? Not yet. But Brutus has been engaging in what his species calls preparatory intimidation rituals. Lots of territorial marking, threat displays, that sort of thing. Yesterday, he cornered Marcus in the cafeteria and performed a full dominance howl. And Marcus responded how? Ghareth's expression shifted to something between bewilderment and grudging respect. He applauded. He actually applauded and said it was pretty impressive, and asked if Brutus took requests. I rubbed my temples with 2 of my 4 hands. I will speak with Marcus about appropriate social responses. That is not all, Krix. Ghareth's voice dropped to an ominous whisper. This morning, Marcus submitted a request for an accommodation. What kind of accommodation? He wants to bring his emotional support animal to school. Now, I had dealt with emotional support animals before. The Metherian students sometimes brought their empathic crystals, which hummed soothingly and glowed when they detected stress. The Aquarian younglings occasionally required their symbiotic coral companions. But humans, as I was learning, had a completely different definition of emotional support. "What kind of animal are we talking about?" I asked cautiously. Ghareth reached into his satchel and pulled out a data pad, handing it to me with the care one might use when passing along an explosive device. "See for yourself." I activated the pad and immediately wished I hadn't. The creature staring back at me looked like someone had taken a badger, fed it nothing but pure aggression for several months, then decided to make it absolutely fearless of anything larger than itself. Its eyes held the kind of casual violence that suggested it would happily fight a starship if given sufficient motivation. "This," I said slowly, "is Marcus's idea of emotional support." According to the documentation, the creature is called a honey badger, Mellivora capensis, native to Earth's African continent. I scrolled through the behavioral notes, and my day officially became a nightmare. It says here that honey badgers are known for attacking creatures 50 times their size, have been observed fighting off lions and hyenas, and are considered one of Earth's most fearless predators. "Keep reading," Ghareth said grimly. "They have been documented breaking into human settlements to steal food, can climb walls, dig under barriers, and are apparently immune to most venoms and toxins." I looked up at Ghareth. "This is what humans consider emotional support. There is more. The creature's care instructions include a note that it should not be fed after midnight, should be provided with enrichment activities, which apparently include locked puzzle boxes and live prey, and requires daily exercise consisting of, and I quote, something challenging enough to keep it from getting bored and destructive." I set the pad down carefully. "Ghareth, we cannot allow this creature into our school. It is clearly a bioweapon disguised as a pet." I tried to tell Marcus that. Do you know what he said? I am afraid to ask. He said, "Oh, Pickles is super sweet once you get to know him. He only bites people he doesn't like." Then he showed me a photo of the creature sleeping on his bed, and I swear to you, Krix, it was smiling while it slept. "Pickles," I repeated flatly. The human named his portable death machine Pickles. The request has been approved by the Human Integration Council. Apparently, Marcus provided medical documentation stating that the creature helps with his anxiety and social adjustment issues. I stared at the datapad again. The honey badger's expression suggested it had anxiety about not being able to fight something at least twice its size on a daily basis. What exactly does Marcus expect this creature to do for his emotional well-being? According to his statement, and this is a direct quote, "Pickles helps me feel confident in new situations because he has zero chill about anything, and that energy is contagious." "Zero chill," I muttered. The human child wants to bring a creature with zero chill to a school environment. It gets worse. I ran a background check on honey badgers in human society. They are apparently popular subjects of entertainment videos on human networks, typically showcasing their complete disregard for size, danger, or common sense. There is one video of a honey badger breaking into a human research facility 12 times in 1 month. The humans found it so amusing they made the creature famous. I was beginning to understand why the rest of the galaxy considered humans to be either utterly insane or frighteningly competent. Possibly both. "When is Marcus planning to bring this creature to school?" "Tomorrow morning. First period. And you want me to handle this situation because—" Ghareth's smile revealed far too many teeth. "Because, my dear Krix, you are our specialist in impossible situations. Besides, Marcus specifically requested to speak with you about integration strategies. Apparently, he has some concerns about how Pickles will interact with the other students." "He has concerns," I said slowly, "about how his weaponized pet will interact with our student body. Oh, and there is one more thing." Ghareth paused at my door, clearly saving the worst news for last. Marcus mentioned that Pickles gets particularly protective when he senses that Marcus is being threatened or intimidated. The implications hit me like a cargo freighter. You mean if Brutus continues his intimidation campaign, the honey badger will interpret it as a direct threat to its human and respond accordingly? Ghareth's grin was absolutely predatory, I confess. I am quite curious to see how that situation resolves itself. And with that cheerful thought, Principal Ghareth left me alone with the datapad and a rapidly developing headache. I spent the next hour researching honey badgers, and each new piece of information made the situation worse. These creatures had been known to chase leopards up trees, raid beehives for fun, and had once held up an entire human military operation because one had wandered onto the base and refused to leave. The door chimed again, and I looked up to see Marcus Vale himself standing in my doorway. He was small, even by human standards, with unruly brown hair and the kind of cheerful expression that suggested he found the entire universe mildly amusing. He was also carrying a pet travel case that was making some very unsettling sounds. "Hi, Mr. Voltan. Thanks for seeing me on such short notice." Marcus's voice had that particular human quality that suggested he was genuinely pleased to be there, despite the circumstances. "Marcus, please sit down. I understand you would like to discuss your accommodation request." "Oh yeah, about Pickles." Marcus set the carrier down next to his chair, and I heard what sounded like something very determined scratching at the inside walls. I know bringing him to school might seem a little unusual, but I promise he's really well behaved. Mostly. Mostly, I repeated. Well, he does have this thing about authority figures who try to intimidate me. He gets a little overprotective. Marcus's expression shifted to something almost apologetic. But that shouldn't be a problem here, right? Everyone seems super nice. I thought about Brutus Grimjaw and his daily intimidation rituals. Marcus, I need you to understand something about our school environment. We have students from many different species, with very different social structures and communication styles. Oh, that's so cool. Pickles loves meeting new people. Well, most people. He's not really a fan of bullies. The scratching sounds from the carrier intensified, and I could have sworn I heard what sounded like tiny growls of anticipation. Marcus, what exactly do you mean by not a fan of bullies? The human child's expression brightened considerably. Oh, he can sense when someone's trying to intimidate me or make me uncomfortable. It's like he has this sixth sense about it, and then he gets really focused on that person until they back off. Focused how? Well, he stares at them a lot, and sometimes he follows them around. And if they don't get the message, he might do this thing where he shows them his teeth and makes this really specific sound that lets them know he's thinking about their life choices. I looked at the carrier again. The scratching had stopped, but now there was an absolute silence that seemed somehow more ominous. Marcus, I need to ask you something very important. Has Pickles ever actually attacked someone who was bothering you? Oh no, nothing like that. Marcus waved his hand dismissively. He's never had to. Usually people figure out pretty quick that maybe they should find someone else to mess with. The implications were staggering. This tiny human child had essentially turned up to school with his own personal enforcer, disguised as an emotional support animal. Would you like to meet him? Marcus asked cheerfully. He's been really excited about coming to school. I think he's looking forward to the social interaction. Before I could object, Marcus was already opening the carrier latch. What emerged from that container defied every expectation I had formed based on the data files. Pickles was roughly the size of a small domestic creature, covered in thick black and white fur, with a distinctive stripe pattern that somehow managed to look both adorable and vaguely threatening. His eyes, however, were what caught my attention immediately. They held an intelligence that was distinctly unsettling, as if he was evaluating everything in the room for potential entertainment value. The honey badger looked around my office with casual interest, then fixed his gaze directly on me. For a moment that lasted approximately 3 seconds but felt like an eternity, We engaged in what I can only describe as a staring contest with a creature that had never lost a fight in its entire evolutionary history. Then Pickles yawned, revealing teeth that seemed disproportionately sharp for something so compact, and began exploring my office with the confidence of someone conducting a professional security assessment. "See? He likes you already," Marcus said happily. "He only does that intimidating stare thing with people he respects." That was respect? I watched as Pickles systematically investigated every corner of my office, occasionally pausing to sniff at particularly interesting objects. Oh yeah, if he didn't like you, he would have just ignored you completely. Pickles has very high standards for who deserves his attention. The honey badger had discovered my collection of stress relief crystals and was now examining them with the focused attention of a demolitions expert studying potential targets. "Marcus, perhaps you should keep Pickles closer to you while we finish our conversation." "Pickles, come here, buddy." Marcus patted his lap, and the honey badger immediately trotted over and settled beside his chair, though his eyes never stopped scanning the room. He's actually super obedient. He just likes to know his environment. I can see that. Now, about tomorrow. I need you to understand that some of our students communicate through intimidation displays. It is not personal, just their natural social structure. Marcus nodded seriously. "Like that big lizard guy who's been following me around." My heart sank. "You have noticed Brutus?" "Oh, Brutus. Yeah, he seems really committed to his whole scary monster routine. It's actually pretty impressive from a performance art perspective." "Marcus, Brutus is not performing. He is establishing dominance hierarchy. His species views your lack of fear as a direct challenge." "Huh." Marcus considered this information while Pickles began what appeared to be a detailed inspection of my desk drawers. "So, he actually thinks he's intimidating me?" "Yes, and when you fail to respond appropriately, it escalates his behavior. That explains why he keeps getting louder." I thought maybe he had hearing problems. I stared at this tiny human child who had apparently been treating a 12-foot apex predator's threat displays as a minor inconvenience. "Marcus, has Brutus made any direct threats?" "Not exactly threats. More like really enthusiastic descriptions of what he could do to someone my size if he wanted to. Yesterday, he spent like 10 minutes explaining his species' hunting techniques. It was actually pretty educational." Pickles had finished his inspection of my desk and was now sitting perfectly still. But something about his posture suggested he was listening intently to every word of our conversation. "And this did not concern you?" Marcus shrugged. "I mean, if Brutus actually wanted to hurt me, he would have done it already, right? All that posturing is just him trying to make himself feel better about being insecure." The psychological insight from this human child was more accurate than most trained counselors could manage. "That is actually quite perceptive, Marcus. My dad says bullies usually just need someone to listen to them. Most of the time they're acting out because something else is bothering them." I was beginning to understand why the Human Integration Council had been so insistent about accommodating Marcus's emotional support animal. This child had an intuitive grasp of social dynamics that was remarkable. But his complete lack of appropriate survival instincts was going to get him killed if he encountered the wrong predator. "However, Marcus, Brutus may not respond well to your continued indifference. His species has very specific escalation patterns when their dominance displays are ignored." "What kind of escalation?" Before I could answer, my door chimed with an emergency tone. The intercom crackled to life with Principal Ghareth's voice, though he sounded significantly more agitated than usual. "Krix, we have a situation in Corridor 7. Brutus has cornered Marcus's locker and is performing what appears to be a territorial claiming ritual." Marcus looked confused. "But I'm right. Here." "Brutus does not know that," I explained, rising from my chair. "He is marking what he perceives as your territory as a prelude to direct confrontation." "Oh, that seems kind of rude." I was about to suggest that Marcus remain in my office while I dealt with the situation. But Pickles had already moved to the door and was making a soft, chittering sound that somehow managed to convey impatience. "I think Pickles wants to go see what's happening." Marcus said, standing and moving toward the door. Marcus, that is exactly what we want to avoid. If Pickles encounters Brutus during an active territorial display, but it was too late. Marcus had already opened the door, and Pickles had trotted out into the hallway with the purposeful stride of someone heading to work. The scene in Corridor 7 was exactly as problematic as I had expected. Brutus had positioned himself directly in front of Marcus's locker and was engaged in a full dominance display. His 12-foot frame was stretched to its maximum height, his crest was fully extended, and he was producing a low-frequency roar that was making the nearby lockers vibrate. A crowd of students had gathered at a respectful distance, watching the performance with the fascination typically reserved for natural disasters. Several teachers were present, but maintaining a safe perimeter, as interrupting a Saurian dominance ritual could trigger an automatic aggression response. Marcus walked up to the edge of the crowd with Pickles trotting beside him, and I watched in horror as he raised his hand and called out, "Hey, Brutus! That's my locker you're decorating." The effect was instantaneous. Brutus spun toward Marcus's voice, his territorial display shifting immediately into a direct threat posture. The crowd scattered as he lowered his massive head and began advancing toward Marcus with predatory intent. "Marcus," Brutus growled, his voice carrying harmonics that triggered fight-or-flight responses in most species. "You will acknowledge proper hierarchy, or I will demonstrate why apex predators rule the food chain." Marcus, to his credit, simply stood his ground with that same mildly interested expression. "Okay, but could you maybe do it somewhere else? I need to get my history book." The casual dismissal was apparently the final straw for Brutus. He reared up to his full height, extended his claws, and let out a roar that shattered 3 light fixtures and sent most of the remaining spectators fleeing for cover. That was when Pickles decided he had seen enough. The honey badger's transformation was unlike anything I'd ever witnessed. One moment he was sitting calmly beside Marcus, and the next he had launched himself through the air with a velocity that defied several laws of physics. He landed on Brutus's chest with the impact of a small meteorite, and immediately began what could only be described as a comprehensive educational seminar on why size advantages mean absolutely nothing when your opponent has no concept of self-preservation. Brutus's threatening roar turned into a sound of complete bewilderment as 20 pounds of pure aggression attached itself to his torso and began demonstrating advanced combat techniques. Pickles was moving too fast to track properly, but I could see that he was systematically targeting every sensitive area he could reach while producing a continuous stream of chittering sounds that somehow managed to convey both fury and professional satisfaction. "What is this creature?" Brutus bellowed, trying unsuccessfully to dislodge his tiny attacker. "That's Pickles," Marcus called out helpfully. "He's my emotional support honey badger. I think he's trying to help you work through some of your aggression issues." Brutus made several attempts to grab the honey badger, but Pickles was utilizing advanced evasion tactics that suggested he had been specifically trained in anti-predator combat. Every time Brutus's claws got close, Pickles would shift position and resume his educational demonstration from a new angle. "Make it stop!" Brutus pleaded, his voice climbing several octaves. "Pickles, that's enough," Marcus said firmly. "I think Brutus gets the point now." Immediately, the honey badger stopped his assault and dropped to the floor, where he sat perfectly still and stared up at Brutus with an expression that clearly conveyed the message that this had been a friendly warning. The corridor was absolutely silent, except for Brutus's labored breathing and the occasional angry chitter from Pickles, who appeared to be offering additional commentary on Brutus's performance. "So," Marcus said conversationally, "did you still want to talk about hierarchy, or would you rather just share the locker space?" "I really don't mind either way." Brutus looked down at the honey badger, who had begun grooming himself with the casual indifference of someone who had just completed a routine task. Then he looked at Marcus, who was still wearing that same friendly expression. "I," Brutus said carefully, "may have misjudged the situation. That's okay. Everyone makes mistakes. Want to be friends instead?" The 12-foot apex predator considered this offer while Pickles continued his grooming routine and occasionally glanced up to make sure Brutus was still paying attention. "Yes," Brutus said quietly. "I would like that very much." "Awesome!" "Oh, and Brutus, Pickles really likes people who are nice to me. I bet you two would get along great." At the mention of his name, Pickles looked up at Brutus and made a soft, chittering sound that somehow managed to convey approval. Then he trotted back to Marcus and sat down beside him, mission apparently complete. The crowd began to disperse, with students chattering excitedly about what they had just witnessed. Several of them approached Marcus to introduce themselves, clearly impressed by his unconventional conflict resolution techniques. Principal Ghareth materialized beside me, his expression unreadable. "Well, that was educational." "Indeed. I believe Marcus's accommodation request should be approved without further discussion." "Agreed, though I suspect we may need to revise our disciplinary protocols." I watched as Marcus showed Brutus some pictures on his datapad, probably photos of Pickles in various domestic situations. The former bully was listening with rapt attention while Pickles supervised the conversation from his position at Marcus's feet. "Ghareth, I have a feeling this is going to be a very interesting academic year." "Krix, my friend, I believe you may be understating the situation considerably." And that is how Marcus Vale and his emotional support honey badger revolutionized the social dynamics of Nexus Prime Academy. Within a week, bullying incidents had dropped to zero. Not because students were afraid of Pickles, but because Marcus had somehow convinced half the school that conflicts were more fun to resolve through conversation than intimidation. Pickles, for his part, seemed to enjoy his new role as campus mediator. He developed a reputation for appearing whenever social tensions arose, not to fight, but simply to sit nearby and remind everyone that aggression had consequences. Brutus became Marcus's closest friend and most dedicated protector, though he never quite got over his healthy respect for Pickles. The honey badger, in turn, seemed to approve of the reformed bully and would occasionally allow Brutus to pet him, which the massive saurian treated as the highest possible honor. As for myself, I learned that sometimes the most effective solutions come in the smallest packages, and that humans have an absolutely terrifying gift for turning apex predators into emotional support systems. Though I still maintain that naming a weaponized death machine Pickles is completely insane, even by human standards. But then again, that might be exactly the point.